In a world obsessed with noise, validation, and constant movement, we often forget the most powerful transformation begins in silence. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in modern psychology, warned us that our addiction to distraction is pulling us further away from our true selves. We scroll, we speak, we perform, but rarely do we listen to the voice within. This video is a journey back to that voice, a call to step away from the noise and reclaim your attention, your energy, your soul. Because when you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything starts to realign. Your relationships shift, your thoughts deepen, your life takes on meaning. This isn't about escape, it's about awakening. Join us as we explore Jung's wisdom and uncover what it truly means to become whole. In today's world, whose silence is a badge of honor, we've been conditioned to equate being busy with being important, successful, or even fulfilled. Our schedules are packed, our phones never stop buzzing, and we rarely sit in stillness without feeling guilty. We wake up and immediately reach for distractions, scrolling through social media, checking messages, consuming content without realizing we're rewarding the most important voice in our lives and our lying. Carl Jung believed that the constant activity of the modern mind was not a sign of health, but of avoidance. He saw that people often fill their lives with noise and movement to escape inner discomfort. Distraction, in this sense, becomes a defense mechanism, a way to not feel, not reflect, not confront the deeper layers of who we are. It's easier to be consumed by the external than to sit with the questions, the inner world presence. When we are constantly engaged in the outer world, we lose the ability to hear the subtle signals from within. The soul speaks in whispers, not shouts, and these whispers are often drowned out by the endless stream of tasks, goals, and superficial interactions. We end up living reactively, moving from one thing to the next, forgetting to ask ourselves whether any of it aligns with who we truly are. True transformation, Jung taught, begins with stepping away from the noise. When we create space for silence, when we stop filling every moment with stimulation, we begin to reconnect with our inner landscape. The stillness that follows can be uncomfortable at first. It brings up thoughts and feelings we've long buried, but it also brings clarity, healing, and a sense of truth that no external validation can offer. The illusion of boosts and us keeps us trapped in a cycle of superficial living. We confuse productivity with purpose, attention with connection, and stimulation with satisfaction. But none of these led to fulfillment. That comes only when we turn inward, sit with ourselves, and begin the journey of becoming whole. And that journey always begins with silence. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's a space. A living, breathing space that allows the unconscious to speak. In Jung's words, the unconscious is not just a storehouse of repressed memories. It is a source of insight, symbols, meaning, and healing, but it speaks in whispers. You cannot hear it when the world is too loud. You cannot receive its wisdom if you never stop to listen. This is why silence is sacred. It is the gateway between the conscious and unconscious mind. And for Jung, the unconscious was not your enemy. It was your guide. But to hear it, you must step away. You must disconnect from the outer world so you can reconnect with your inner one. Silence is not loneliness. Silence is where the soul begins to remember itself. When you stop reacting, you start receiving. When you stop chasing answers from others, you start uncovering the answers you've carried all along. And when you go deep enough, silence is not empty, it's full of insight, full of memory, full of meaning. This is not just self-care, this is soul care. When you begin to focus inward, the first thing you meet is not always light, it's often your shadow. Jung called the shadow the unconscious part of the psyche that holds all the traits we deny, reject, or suppress. Our fears, our guilt, our wounds, our anger. These are the parts of ourselves that we try to hide, not just from others, but from ourselves. But here's the truth Jung knew well: what we suppress does not disappear. it only grows stronger. The more we ignore the shadow, the more it controls us from beneath the surface. And when we stay busy, when we avoid silence, we avoid the shadow. We avoid the real work. But when you face your shadow, everything begins to change. You begin to reclaim your energy. You realize that the things you feared were not monsters, but messengers. You begin to integrate the parts of yourself you once disowned. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean becoming self-centered. It means becoming whole. And silence is how you begin that integration. By sitting with your discomfort instead of running from it, you begin to dissolve it, and the more you face your shadow, the more peace you gain. Let's be honest. Most of us want to be liked. We want approval, praise, validation. It feels good. But Carl Jung warned that this desire, if left unchecked, can trap us. Because the more we rely on external validation, the more disconnected we become from our inner truth. The ego thrives on attention. It craves recognition. But the soul thrives in silence. It finds power in presence, not applause. Jung believed that if we live only through the ego, we live only on the surface, and the surface is fragile, easily shaken, easily broken. The danger of constantly seeking validation is that it keeps you small. You begin to shape your words, your actions, even your personality around what others want to hear. You lose touch with who you really are because you're too busy being who they want you to be. But when you focus on yourself and stay silent, you begin to hear a different voice. A quieter voice. Your voice. You begin to validate yourself. And that is where real power begins. Everything starts to fall into place not when you get louder, but when you get real. Silence gives you back your authenticity. It gives you back your self-worth. Not borrowed from the world, but built from within. Attention is energy, and where your attention goes, your energy flows. In the modern world, attention is a currency constantly being spent, often consciously. We give our attention to people, media, and situations that drain us without ever noticing the cost. Every scroll, every reaction, every moment spent on something that doesn't serve you is a withdrawal from your personal power. Carl Jung recognized that true growth comes from bringing awareness to our inner life. But how can we become aware if our energy is scattered? If we are fragmented by 1,000 distractions? How do we expect to feel whole? The answer begins with reclaiming your attention. When you focus on yourself, not in a self-absorbed way, but in a self-respecting way, you begin to gather your energy. You begin to come home to yourself. You notice what fuels you and what drains you. You realize how much time and mental energy you've given to things that never gave back. You begin to detach from the drama, the noise, the emotional entanglements that once felt necessary but now feel heavy. As your energy returns to you, so does your clarity. Reclaiming your attention is not about ignoring the world. It's about choosing where to engage and why. It's about giving your presence to the moments, people, and thoughts that truly matter. And when you do that, when you stop giving your energy away, you become magnetic. You attract peace, purpose, and alignment. And suddenly, life begins to respond to the version of you that is fully present, fully aware, and fully focused on becoming whole. For Carl Jung, the ultimate goal of psychological development wasn't happiness, success, or even knowledge. It was individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. It's not about becoming someone new, but about shedding everything you are not. It is the uncovering of your most authentic self, the self that exists beneath the roles, the masks, the expectations of society. The path of individuation begins the moment you stop living on autopilot. It begins when you stop chasing approval and start listening to your inner calling. When you start to ask, who am I when no one is watching? What beliefs have I adopted that don't actually serve me? What parts of myself have I silenced to fit in? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary. Silence is the fertile ground where these questions take root. It is in the space of stillness that your true self begins to emerge. As you let go of the noise and begin to hear your own voice, you start making choices from authenticity rather than fear. You no longer live according to the script written by others. You begin to write your own. Individuation requires courage. It demands that you confront not only your shadow but also your potential. It asks you to step beyond the familiar into the unknown territory of your soul. It is not a what-I'm event, but a lifelong journey. And it is through this process that life begins to make sense. Your experiences, even the painful ones, begin to reveal purpose. Your struggles begin to point you towards your strengths. And you focus on yourself not in a shallow way, but in the Jungian sense of self-realization. You move from fragmentation to wholeness. And in that wholeness, everything begins to fall into place. Life begins to reflect the integrity and clarity of someone who is not trying to be anyone else but is committed to being fully themselves. In a reactive world, detachment is a superpower. But detachment doesn't mean apathy, it means clarity. Carl Jung understood that when we are overly identified with our emotions, we lose perspective. We become caught in loops of reaction, pulled in every direction by people, expectations, fears, and stories that may not even be ours. To detach is to reclaim your center. It means observing your thoughts without becoming them, watching your emotions without letting them drive your decisions. This is the gift of silence. In silence, the mind settles, the fog clears. You begin to see not only what's around you, but what's within you. When you detach, you stop feeding the narratives that keep you small. You stop reacting to people who thrive on chaos. You stop personalizing things that were never about you. You begin to move from presence, not panic, from wisdom, not wounds. Jung taught that true transformation comes from bringing the unconscious into consciousness. And that can only happen when you create space to witness your patterns without judgment. Detachment creates this space. It is not a withdrawal from life but a new way of engaging with it. One that is rooted, grounded, and deeply aware. When you no longer react to everything, you start to respond with intention. You become less influenced by the world and more aligned with your inner truth. And in that space, clarity is born. You begin to understand what truly matters. You begin to see your path, and most importantly, you begin to walk it with peace. Inside each of us is a voice that knows. A quiet, guiding presence that has always been there. Carl Jung referred to this as the self, the totality of who you are. Beyond the ego, beyond the roles and masks. It's not always loud, it doesn't always argue, but it is always honest, and when we learn to trust that voice, we begin to live with authenticity. The problem is, most of us have spent years, if not decades, ignoring it. We've been trained to doubt ourselves, to defer to outside opinions, to follow paths prescribed by others. The inner voice gets drowned out by the noise of culture, comparison, and fear, but silence makes space for it again. In silence, you start to notice a deeper rhythm, a sense of what feels aligned and what doesn't. You begin to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of intuition, between what you've been told and what you truly believe, and as you give this voice more space, it grows stronger. Jung believed that this inner wisdom was connected to something greater, a collective unconscious, a deep well of human experience and insight that transcends the personal. When we trust our inner voice, we are not just trusting ourselves, we are tuning into something timeless, something sacred. Learning to trust yourself isn't about always being right. It's about being real. It's about honoring your own experience, your own truth, your own process. And when you do that, when you stop outsourcing your wisdom, your life begins to unfold with purpose and grace. This is not just psychological healing. It is spiritual empowerment. The journey inward reconnects you with a guidance system that was never broke and only buried. And when you begin to live from that place, everything starts to align, not because the world changes, but because you do. Solitude is not loneliness, it is meeting yourself fully. It's the sacred space where your soul stretches and breathes. For Carl Jung, solitude was essential for the process of self-realization. In a world where we are constantly surrounded by noise, people, and expectations, solitude gives us the rare gift of uninterrupted self-awareness. It is in solitude that we are no longer performing, no longer reacting, no longer distracted. We are simply being. In solitude, things rise to the surface. Old memories, unprocessed emotions, hidden dreams, truths that have waited patiently beneath the surface. This is not always comfortable, but it is always clarifying. The silence of solitude brings forward what the noise of life buries. Jung understood that the path to wholeness cannot be walked in a crowd. It requires solitude, reflection, and deep listening. You must learn to enjoy your own company. You must become your own companion. And when you do, you begin to discover layers of yourself you didn't know existed. You begin to reclaim your original self, the one untouched by expectation or conditioning. Solitude deepens your relationship with your intuition. It allows creativity to flow. It nurtures your inner world. And the more time you spend with yourself in stillness, the more you stop looking for others to complete you. You stop chasing approval. You stop performing. You begin to know yourself. This isn't isolation, it's illumination. Solitude is not about rejecting the world, but preparing yourself to re-enter it with clarity and integrity. When you emerge from solitude, you don't return as the same person. You return grounded, centered, whole. And from that state, everything in life begins to align with the quiet power you've rediscovered within. There comes a moment in the inner journey when the chaos quiets. The fragmentation begins to mend, and a deeper coherence emerges. This is the moment of integration, the point at which the scattered pieces of your identity begin to form a whole. Carl Jung believed that true healing is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming complete. Wholeness, not flawlessness, is the goal. Integration happens slowly, silently, often without grand announcement. One day, you simply notice that you're no longer running from yourself. You're no longer over-identifying with your emotions, no longer seeking constant distraction. You feel a steadiness within. You begin to trust your path, your voice, your being. All the parts of you, the light and the shadow, the broken and the beautiful, are no longer in opposition. They begin to work in harmony. You understand your past not as something to escape, but as a story that shaped your strength. Your pain becomes your teacher. Your silence becomes your sanctuary. In this space of integration, life no longer feels like something happening to you, it feels like something you are actively co-creating. You respond rather than react. You change rather than chase. You align with your deeper values and let go of the superficial noise. This is when everything begins to fall into place, not because life gets easier, but because you changed your relationship to it. Jung taught that the task of life is to become conscious of yourself, not just to know facts about who you are, but to live in alignment with your inner truth. Integration is the lived expression of that truth. It's the calm confidence that arises when you are no longer divided inside. And so, when you focus on yourself and stay silent, you begin to see the world differently. You begin to act differently. You begin to attract peace, meaning, and connection, not by force, but by resonance. Because the world around you starts to reflect the stillness and clarity you've cultivated within. This is the power of the inner journey. This is what Carl Jung devoted his life to teaching. And this is the path waiting for you, not out there, but inside. If this video resonated with you, it's not by accident, somewhere deep inside. Your soul is calling for alignment, for silence, for focus, for truth. Carl Jung believed that our most important task is to become who we truly are. And that journey begins not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet of our own hearts. If you're ready to go deeper, to explore more of Jung's ideas on meaning, Shadow work, love, and the self. Subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. And take a moment, just a moment, to sit in silence today. You may be surprised by what you find. Because when you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything truly begins to fall into place.